I'm Sarah Miller, this is Emily Jane Murray, and we're coming to you from the FPAN, Florida Public Archaeology Network's Northeast region. And I'm also director of the East Central region, but I wanted you to know, if you were not aware, that there are archaeologists across the state working for the same organization we do that are there to help you get out in the woods with you, help you with whatever archaeological needs you have. I mean, we're not going to go do like heavy excavation because we're education and outreach oriented, but anything you could think of or need some contact information, consider us a good second clearinghouse to the Division of Historical Resources, who's another great place to start. Probably should start there, Paulette McFadden and the others, but we network around. Oh, Chris, final thing, how long do we have to talk?
40 minutes.
Long. All right. So you heard it. If you think I'm going long, it's I should keep to the 40. So in a nutshell, the mission of our organization is to help protect the very past of the state through education and outreach. And when I go through our mission and our main research goals, can you still hear it? I can still hear it. I know you can hear me, but is it echoing for anybody out there? Are you telling me it's just me that can hear that? My apologies for that. Okay. Just to go through examples of what we've been up to right now is Florida Archaeology Month. So we've been doing a heck ton of education and outreach, letting people know about the resources across the state and with different focuses each year. Last night, I was in Sanford giving a talk on Florida First Peoples. So that's where I was yesterday doing that activity. Assisting local governments, we went on Friday, we were out with historic cemeteries doing some conservation work and checked in with the city of St. Augustine that also has an archaeological ordinance. So the work we do often supports that department within the city, and the work with the cemeteries helps St. Johns County, and because those are unincorporated areas where those cemeteries are located. And today we are assisting the state. We're here by invitation. How honored are we feeling to be here today? And we also work closely with the Division of Historical Resources in the Department of State. Yeah, and there you can see if you are located in other areas, just let me know and I can connect you with the director and the other staff that are fantastic that work in those areas. So this is really my second favorite day at work. My first day is today, being here with you all in this room. Second favorite, and see, Chris, you're here and there too, so I don't have to pick. Oh, are you in this picture? Maybe you're taking the picture. We have Brent Backelder and Graham Williams, and we're out on airboats doing what we do. There's Emily Jane. There's another district staff member. And one of the main activities we got involved with was relocating sites. And I think it pertains also to the topic of prescribed fire and burns, because you may be looking at documents that show you where archaeological sites are. They might not be there. We have gone back and I mean a high percentage, if not every site we go to, we either have to group them together, like this is two different sites, but you can see from the blue dots we found material extending, so that's actually one larger site. This one had a little area there, but oh, that's a new site that we recorded. It might be contiguous, but we didn't observe anything in between. So now you've got a larger site than you were maybe thinking you had when you were doing your fire plan, and also another site discovered. Some of these you can kind of guess when you're out there that they would extend all the way to the river, but they may not be showing up in some of the models that you're looking at. And then this is another one. We're excited. We have a new grant that is going to be funded starting July 1 to work with the district on documenting more of these sites, doing some monitoring and some updating of files. And this is a Murat site down in St. Johns County. and excited to go back there, but it does look like there are sites in between the two sites that are there. So even if you think you know what you have, you probably have more, and the boundaries are probably wider than you think. Oh, that sounds good now to me. Thank you, Chris. But we're gonna pause for a second. Two things we've assumed today. One, how many of you have taken arm training? Beautiful, yes. And how many of you, we just assume you're all doing your own fire plans, and we're not gonna talk about that kind of thing unless he wants some of that from two archaeologists. Won't be helpful, but we'll put some recommendations for those fire plans in at the end. All right, Emily Jane is gonna give us a refresher.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the types of sites you may encounter. So Florida has almost 15,000 years of people living here, all over places. If you think about one of the places that you like to visit, somebody else has probably wanted to be there before. High ground next to water. That's where the $1 million houses are. That's where the shell mounds were, where people were living. So we find lots of different materials. The oldest types of artifacts we're going to find are stone tools because they last the longest when you leave them outside in Florida, right? But as we kind of come through time, we of course can find lots of different varied materials from all the different peoples who are here, including all of our colonial and historic time periods. And the biggest thing to know about archaeology is it's all about the context. So if you bring me a piece of pottery, I can say, cool, somebody in the past, maybe with some range of dates, made or used pottery here, right? But if you bring me to the site where that pottery was found and I find stone tools and I find shells and I find animal remains, and all of a sudden we can paint this beautiful picture of what somebody was doing in the past, right? So it's not just about the things, not just about the artifacts. Those are the points of data we use to study people from the past. So context is important, and thinking about where things were found, what was found next to them, what was found above or below them in the ground, all of those things. So just thinking about some of the different sites, I feel like the most common site we have here in Florida site type is shell midden. So these are big piles of refuse that were left standing back 8,000 years or so. And in this, we find all sorts of other materials. So we find ceramics, we find bone, we find stone tools, we find shell tools. Shell midden's really great because it has a lot of preservation. Florida has acidic soil that leaches. Organic materials break down very quickly and go away. When you put them in a big pile of shells, all of that calcium can protect those materials. And so we get really cool things that we can find in these sites. So, and once again, people just left piles of trash all over the state. So we have lots of shell midden everywhere. We have marine shells, but we also see freshwater shells along a lot of the rivers. So thinking about some of the actual materials you may encounter and how fire may or may not affect them. Lithics, as I say, stones last a very long time, so some of the oldest tools we have. But lithics can become thermally altered, so a lot of these are made out of a stone called chert, which is found down in veins of limestone, and people in the past would put these rocks in the fire to change the way that they break, the hardness of it, to change kind of what their rock was like. So if you apply fire to stone tools today, you'll have some of these same effects. So something to think about. We find a lot of ceramics. So here's some examples of some indigenous ceramics that we find. These artifacts go back about 4,000 years, and we actually have some of the oldest ceramics in North America found here along the St. Johns River Valley. So that's kind of exciting to know. And ceramics are pretty hardy. They actually will be structurally safe till about 600 degrees Celsius. So there's going to be a theme of cooler fires here that can help some of these materials withstand and maintain and last a little longer. Organics, once again, we don't always find these kinds of things, but when we do, they're very important because they can give us a lot more insight into the past. But of course, Florida is not conducive to the preservation of these, and a lot of these can go up in flames when exposed to fires too. So, so thinking about how shell or bones can react to fire. Thinking about historic sites, so of course, wooden artifacts, great fuel for fires, right? So thinking about creating those buffer zones around some of your historic structures. Sawdust piles are a really interesting resource because we have some of these that are left over from historic sawmills, but that is one giant pile of fuel that will go pretty quickly. So considering, where that could be from, if it's historic or not, and thinking about how to protect those or keep the flames away, because you don't want that interfering with your burns. The turpentine industry was, of course, a huge part of Florida's history. So thinking about cat faces, if you see those, and how to, maybe avoid areas or trying to keep some of these out of the burn zones if possible. Of course, a lot of hardy cups are found in these areas. And thinking about the vegetation, because you may not have that structure left, but you may go out and find the trees that were, very pointedly planted or landscaped. We find a lot of exotic plants in the woods, right, that people put there, and that can be evidence of the past. And sometimes those can be, very specific clues to what's happening. So thinking about when you encounter those. And then also things like old roads. So a lot of these get used as fire breaks, which they can be great fire breaks, but thinking, about these as cultural resources and how to maintain them through the process. Glass, another important type of historic artifacts that we find. And once again, if you get above 500 degrees Celsius, you may get crizzling, which is a fun word, where the glass starts to crack and break apart. And then thinking about historic cemeteries, so we've seen, unfortunately, a lot off in the woods that you can't quite tell are there. So thinking about how to protect these with using things like buffers and maintaining, better vegetation than this, which puts the sites more at risk. So
That part seemed to go really fast, Emily Jane, but back here, just to talk about heat effects on research. One of the things is critical in our mind, and hopefully yours too, is, the whole point of identifying sites and defining them, submitting the site file, monitoring them, is that we're looking for things that by statute are eligible for listing on the National Register. Most archaeological sites, in fact, just about all, are eligible under criterion D, which is their ability to add to our scientific knowledge. So a lot of archaeological sites, historical sites, are related to famous people, famous events, famous places. But archaeology, the significance is in its contribution to science. So when the data, being our artifacts, the features, the structures are impacted, that's part of what is lost. That's hard to say it's just this artifact or just the structure. Is actually the broader cultural context of Florida that could be at risk. So some of the things are carbon-14 dates that you need from charcoal produced by fire. Obviously difficult when your forest is on fire. And then I wanted to show, some of those color variations that you see. And when they have that soot on them from their original firing process, that is datable by radiocarbon dates. So when we're talking about heavy equipment, maybe breaking up some of the ceramics or what else a fire can do, it robs us of that data that we can use to say, oh, this is a 3,000-year-old site. This is a X old number of site. Also the oxidizable carbon ratio, that gets impacted, and there's a good contact email there. A lot of remote sensing, archaeomagnetic tools that are used are changed. The dendrochronology is an interesting one because it's become more refined and more people are doing dendrochronology on sites. For example, next month, Leanne Newsom in St. Augustine, she's going to do some coring of some trees at Talamato Cemetery, where those trees are supposed to be at least 200 250 years old. So that coin would be really interesting, but around historic sites, but it is an absolute dating that goes back to indigenous periods also. So leave the trees, those dating of those significant sites. And then getting back to that point Emily Jane mentioned of the control burns designed to cold combustion temperatures are going to be more friendly for cultural resources. Minimal effect on diagnostic artifacts. Those are the artifacts that when we see, we can give you a date. It's such a fun trick in the field to say, oh, this site dates to this time, or this was used by this culture. But you know, you want to be able to save. So when Emily Jane talked about the burnt glass, there are a lot of diagnostic spots on glass. So if they get a crizzle or melted, then those attributes are no longer visible. Definitely want to avoid significant impacts as people are reviewing your burn plans, but that's some of the things that they're looking for. Look at controls for the vegetations of the site and reduce the harmful effects of wildfire. Looking at direct and indirect effects. So these are some of the ways that there are direct effects that you can imagine. I think you are more experts in these activities than me, but just to note that it's really after, it's the fire line construction and the mop-up activities that contributes to the greatest adverse effects. More so than erosion and falling trees in the context of prescribed fire burns. Some heavy equipment, so talking about that after process for the other activities that impact when heavy equipment is brought in. So actually your mowers look super awesome, but I was like, just thinking about the weight of them and just be mindful that there can be sensitive things underneath, and that way plays into your prioritization of doing what you got to do. But just know that they are still down there and might be a potential impact that you have through compaction. Some of the chemicals and the fire retardants are an issue. We had quite a debate about the dip vats, but just know a lot of those agricultural features out in the field have a lot of chemicals as well. So that could be bad for you and for the site. And then collection of artifacts. I think it's really tricky when you see one. So Emily Jane has a tool she's brought for you. She's going to talk about more later. Not yet, but to help document artifacts as you see them in the field, but not to collect them. Because I think also in fire situations, you're acting as best as you can. And if you even pause to think about cultural resources, I'm really grateful. But bringing things out of context or collecting them and coming back with them, as you also learned in arm training, is not advised. Also letting people know beforehand that their visiting may be impacted, and the visitors are also at risk of doing collecting afterwards on the sites that you work on that you probably already know, and then reaching out before incidents occur. Preventative. Just a review of the legislation that I'm stealing another of your slides later, but when to stop your activities on prescribed fires is, of course, if any human remains are encountered, you want to stop and call in to local law enforcement or to Paulette at actually Katie Meard, who's our state archaeologist here in Tallahassee. And then chapter 267, which I'm also guessing is what requires the burn plans to be reviewed. Importance of communication. I think you guys are aware of that. The reducing risk to the cultural resources, and this is going to make more sense to you than it makes sense to me. but reducing the fuel loads, placing fire breaks and fire lines, as you already know, and looking at the cooler fires, so below 300 degrees to reduce the heating of the soil. I'm sure you already know the steps for preparing the plan, but just wanting to emphasize, just provide in that plan, comment on the cultural resources, but also what to do if inadvertent finds are discovered from the burn. And we have part of a solution for that for you in a minute. In fact, that minute is now, because talking about documenting and monitoring the sites. And we have another tool you may not be familiar with our Heritage Monitoring Scout program and how you can monitor and document things in site as you see them.
All right. Excuse me. So HMS Florida is our statewide, we developed it as a citizen science program to look at heritage at risk. So thinking about things like climate change impacts. Turns out it's a great tool for land managers as well, because we've taken all of the site information and put it into one online database that is based in a GIS. So it's not just a box of paper files that are maybe useful, maybe not. So you can see sites in this database. You can complete the monitoring forms. We based the form itself off of what the state requires for annual assessments. For cultural resources, looking at the overall site condition of the good, fair, poor. So when we use this as a tool, looking at the basic site file information in Florida, in the Florida Master Site File, so the state's inventory of cultural resources, you know, are the sites where they're supposed to be. We've been to sites that said they were destroyed, and we found tons of shell still on the ground. We've been to sites that people haven't seen since 1940. Or if they have, they've not left a paper trail. So making sure that things are up to date. The biggest shell mound on the East Coast, Turtle Mound, is hard to miss. It's like 70 feet tall. It was mapped in the wrong spot in the site file. So you can do all of the modeling and planning you want, but if your dot on the map is not placed correctly, none of that really matters, right? And then, you know, we use this to look at the impacts and threats that we're seeing at these sites. And every time we visit, you know, we find another piece of pottery, we find another stone tool, and that's helping us learn about these sites as well. So, you know, collecting this data, helping prioritize the sites and threats, and then this can help with management and planning. This is the monitoring form. I'm a professional archaeologist and I don't want to go do all of the crazy paperwork. So we tried to make this as simple, you know, for the public, for folks who this is not their area of expertise, but trying to get enough information about the sites, about what's visible out there. Once again, getting that overall site condition, getting a site priority, making notes of any follow-up that needs to happen in terms of updating site files and things like that. And then, like I say, we have it all in a database system that is based in Arches, which is an online open source platform. Anyways, so we've set up 4 state land managers accounts where we have, you know, the specific state park, the collection of parks who may be managed under one person, and then the region. So we have all of these accounts ready if you're interested in using the system. We've communicated with DHR, with state parks. I think we've talked with the forestry. And so we have this available for you as a resource, and the folks up in Tallahassee are aware of this, and, you know, they say it's cool. So
they do not want the monitoring data.
yes. This is the thing that we ran into with the land managers, is even when folks were diligent about going out and filling out the little piece of paper, then the folks at like the site file or, and you know, at DHR don't want to know about the changes that may or may not be occurring. They only want to know about the big changes. So this is a way to document that and to keep it in a location that, you know, if that box goes missing, like it's still, you know, we back the database up and we can pull information from it. You can upload pictures, so it's a really great tool. And we brought some stickers and some photo scale cards. So we use these all the time in the field when we find artifacts, because everyone wants to pick the artifact up. I get it, but then you can put the card on the ground, take your picture where the artifact was, pick it up, and then know to put it back where the card was. So, so we'll leave these out on a table if you guys would like to grab some. They are waterproof. They are plastic though, so they are not fireproof.
And I wanted to point out, when we first started HMS, like the #1 scout that we had was a volunteer on prescribed fires. And he monitored about 100 sites. I don't know if Patrick's in the room. People know Patrick, but it was a great source of information, and he being able to relocate sites as well. We talked about when to stop and about the importance about communication. And I assume, you know all this, but just to state again, to document newly found resources. And we love to get out in the field. So if you ever need someone to go out and help you identify cultural resources or record the cultural resources, like do the paperwork, we're happy to help, because we just want the most complete inventory of cultural sites in the state that we can get. So here's some point on the summary of looking at what's most susceptible, the wood and other organics, looking at things on the surface, of course, will be more damaged, but even things below the surface can be. That pool fire will probably not cause permanent damage to most of the inorganic materials. And then things 5 centimeters or below should not be harmed either. There's an exception with the roots, and then we agree, prescribed fire, and we're very proud and tell all our California visitors, did you know that Florida is #1? We recognize the beneficial fire effects, and for archaeology, this means increased information. I had a slide, but I didn't put it in, of us going to the GTM NER in Northeast Florida. We've been there so many times, but they just had a prescribed fire. And because of that, we could see a midden that we had not seen before and got that recorded. And in conversation with them, we were really curious about how we could develop a protocol for how to monitor for archaeological sites after a prescribed fire. So if you see stuff after, let us know and we can come help or look at any photos. Also, the state is very willing to do that too. And yeah, maintaining the cultural scenes that we see. Oh, and I wanted to end on a site you may not know about, but I thought, these are fire people. They're going to want to know about something cool. Yesterday, when I did the talk in Sanford on Florida First People, someone came up and asked me if I knew about the Must Farm. Many of you know about the Must Farm? It was new to me, and now it's new to you. It's a Bronze Age settlement. It's over in England. But what's cool about it is it burned, and because of the burning and the way the site collapsed, that there are so many organics that would normally not preserve. So it has the largest collection of Bronze Age textiles, beads, domestic wooden artifacts, including buckets, platters, troughs, shafts, and handles, and domestic metalwork, axes, sickles, hammer, spear. And it's a significant site. From there, they found 18,000 pieces of structural wood that preserved and was recorded, and a lot of the information about the construction of the settlement. So sometimes, the fire does its work to help preserve sites. And I figured, if I'm an archaeologist and people are coming up to me asking me if I know about this site, I thought I'd share it with you guys, as it's another cool touchstone for the way archaeology and fire can interact. And we have time for questions. Yes.
Use of this software and platform, is it specific to the federal government?
What?
Repeat the question.
Oh, repeat the question.
No, just for the Zoom.
We love the question we received because it's about HMS Florida and arches, and is it kind of proprietary to state or federal governments, can NGOs use it? And yes, anyone can use it. As you know, a lot of archaeological sites, they are exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. So we have built in some steps to be aware and conscious of that. We do have a really strong ethics statement. We do a lot of in-person training, but we're now developing a Canvas course. So wherever people are, they can go through those steps and become a monitoring scout. So as Emily Jane mentioned, if you're a land manager, we can make an account for the land managing unit. And if you're with nonprofits, or NGO, just let us know where you are. And we work with a lot of nonprofits, and they can have access. They may have limited access to only sites, that they manage or in their periphery. But I'll hand it to Emily Jane, who also may have something to add to that. Cool. But thank you for an HMS question. We're hoping it's of interest to you all because it's a way to show changes over time. I see your hand, I'm going for you next. But and to say that the state just doesn't want all the monitoring information stored. So it helps, because sometimes you go to a site and there is no change, and sometimes negative data are good data. So we still want to know what it looked like the last time someone was there. And the state really just wants to know more about those major changes and how they can help.
How old must the site be before it's considered an archaeological site?
I love that question. It depends is the answer, but I'll say for like the legal definition for National Historic Preservation Act is at 50 years or older. There are exemptions all the time, like brutalist architecture. Okay, now it's eligible, fine. It used to not be. That used to be our exception. But cemeteries is a good place to start because the state is very encouraging. They want to know everything they can about cemeteries, and they acknowledge that a lot of them, some of them aren't even 50 years old yet or not, but they say to go ahead and put them on the site file. Cemeteries, they have a cutoff date if they're 75 years or older. That generally goes to the jurisdiction of the state archaeologist. Anything younger than that, but I would just advise call local law enforcement all the time. But those protections in 267 and in ARPA are at the 50-year mark for those artifacts. Anything to add?
Yeah, we've listed the first trailer park homes and the first billboards on the Florida Master Site file because they have hit 50 years or old. Yeah, one of the definitions for an archaeological site is 3 or more artifacts from a similar time period in I forget what the exact area is, but in a area together. So there's pop top beer cans are now technically 50 years old, so they would be considered historic artifacts. There are folks who specialize in the beer can chronology and seriation, so some fun rabbit holes to go down there.
Funny.
Yes, historic archaeologists will donate lots of their free time to those activities. And we didn't show any of those today. Those aren't generally the cultural resources we're concerned about. We're the people who are not present to advocate for their own sites, especially the indigenous and for the early colonial period, historic period, things that you want to tell your grandchildren about in 100 years that are important to the state of Florida. Yes.
So, we work at Big Bend and we have a ton of cultural sites. So, yeah, are all of our cultural sites going to be on there? We can update that and stuff.
Yeah.
We put our data into like LMIS, and I think it's very convoluted how all the data gets.
As Emily Jean mentioned, it was designed to be a community-based archaeology community engagement program. And it's not that we weren't thinking about you all are very important to us, but we started from the community perspective because we also wanted it to make sense for it to look good. In fact, one of the issues the state said was it looked too official
Or
Oh,
too
it looked
fun?
too fun. It looked too fun. Could we official it up? And we're like, oh, so we added a different, just like plate to it, so it looks a little more businessy, but it's easy to use. We basically made our own site file because what we were frustrated by, I think land managers, you have good control of the sites where you're at, but when we were sending out volunteers and ourselves sometimes, we didn't spatially know, like, oh, we're here, but there's 4 more sites around here. So it is meant to be geo-referenced very easily. And then you can look up the other reports from that site. But I think Big Bend is a perfect area to use it, and your sites are already loaded up in there. And we have staff that can help train you in HMS or even come out and do some initial visits as you would like to have archaeologists out there with you.
Yeah, that would be an interest to have people out there to help our sites. Get to learn more about them.
Yeah, I'll try and pull arches up here.
One of one of our offices used to be at, I guess it's still kind of maybe at Crystal River State Park, so they would, our staff member would go out with the aquatic preserves there, and they'd be like, well, we have to go monitor this, but there's also this mitten, so he's like, I'll just go with you, and we can do it all, so, yes.
Chris, do you want to make that go away
Yeah.
and pull up a browser? Because then
Is that sharing the browser share? All right, so if you just want to type in,
Just up here.
then we can also show you the interface because we put a lot into it. We got some funding from the Division of Historical Resources, some special category grant monies. And again, we're going to be using HMS for our study for the next grant that kicks off July 1st. You ready to go?
let's go.
Get out there. And that'll be a 2-year study, and we're really grateful to the Water Management District for having us out. But I don't know if you guys know how much archaeologists love you. They really do. So they're gonna want to meet more of these. Any other questions? Yes.
What are your responsibilities in coordinating with the tribe?
Excellent question. And I actually had a slide in here, and I didn't know how much consultation this group does. I'll say never make assumptions when it comes to consulting with the tribes, being the Seminole and the Miccosukee that are federally recognized here. So even if your plan is going through the regular channels, don't assume if you get SHPO agreement. And I would say this in general. So I don't know very closely your protocols and procedures. There may be letters of compliance or tick boxes that the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, those TIPOs that they do. But I'm going down there in a couple weeks. I can say we never work as much with the tribes as we should. And some of that is just geographic and distant. And I think the most important consultation we can do is to get there, learn about their people from the Atotiki Museum. Have anybody been to the Atotiki Museum? Oh, you've got to go. It's fantastic. It's a drive in our sense, maybe out to the middle of nowhere. I think this group would enjoy that. And then the museum is what the Seminole Nation has decided to share with outsiders. So it's a great starting point to go there and see what's important to them and understand their stories, understand their approach to the environment and site. And then there's a whole professional office of that Tribal Historic Preservation Office that reviews documents, works with us if we're doing conferences together, will help review materials. But whenever we have a project come up, like our new one, I send it right to them in the early stages, and they always, I feel like we'll say, we'll let you know if we have interest in this project, but know that their compliance never expires. That I don't hear back within 30 days means nothing. You know, I still need to consult with and be mindful of what they may have interests in. You want to give a little arches tour?
So the arches, the database, what we put into it is all of the sites in the Florida master site file. So as we record new sites, they don't get put in there until we match it up. So everything's coming straight from the site file. And this, these are all of the sites. Oh yeah. I'm not, yeah, so we have Taylor County.
Beer popped off.
You gotta find 3 or more of them and then you can put them on, no, it's funny, I've actually, had colleagues that have struggled with like, how do you, like, there was a historic hunting camp, but it doesn't seem that old or significant, but it's technically a resource and it shows the use of the landscape. So it's like, what do you do with that? You can at least record it, so, yeah, so we have all the sites. And what we've done is put some of the information from the site file, it's definitely not the entire site file, but just enough to show you this is and not exciting site. So this is a prehistoric mound. I'm gonna go.
I would say the majority of sites are indigenous that are recorded in the Florida Master Site file, followed by historic sites, cemeteries make up a good amount, submerged resources, but most the surveys were done in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They were definitely not recording pull tabs then. So it's those sites that, and HMS is, you can document new sites. We're happy to help with that, but this is meant for any site that is already recorded on the Florida Master Site file. So it must already be in the inventory. And our thinking was, well, if we go to monitor a site, it's not in there, it should be in there. That's like the #1 thing you can do to protect a site and to let managers know where things are located, because you're making important decisions based on some of those things you see.
So this is.
Well, what you're seeing right now is only open to the master people. In fact, they don't give me the password for the overall because they don't want me to mess it up. So they're the only people that have access to the full site are the DHR, the State Archaeologist Office, and then FPN staff who work with us. So if there's a land manager, then you can get a sign on for that. If I'm talking about like volunteers, there's not going to be a volunteer wandering in saying, I'm doing this, because they need to go through the training. They need to be recognize the ethics, which include not going on state land without permission. But I think we advise scouts to help to come to us when they want to do, because some of the long-term volunteers in state parks are some of the best scouts too, if they're willing to do this, when they're vested volunteers already through the park or through the management area, then we're happy to help in that. But most of the sites, especially indigenous, a mound site, those kind of things are behind a very deep wall here. But land managers, if it's your park, you will have access to that. But that's not something that goes out to the public. Volunteers will get access to a sample list of sites that they can go out to that are not on any state or federal land. They're usually sites that are already interpreted for the public that they can go. And again, cemeteries for me is the gold mine, because they are included in Freedom of Information Act. They're usually, safe places, marked places for people to go out and, show me, you will go out to 10 cemeteries and do a good job on those monitoring forms. And then maybe we can progress you through other channels. But this is really, in this instance, for you guys, for you who do this work, because that's an audience that we didn't originally build the database for, but we realized like, wow, yeah, if this is helpful to you, And we do have, is it like 60 land manager accounts so far that are active?
Yeah.
So there are already land managers in other areas of Florida. We used to be a component of the ARM training, and we would talk about HMS and how to monitor the sites, but some of that stopped during the pandemic, and now they're doing virtual ARM trainings also. So if you want to ask Paulette or ask the ARM trainers what they think, and I think it's really up to each individual land managing unit how they want to do monitoring. State parks, we do have state parks that are using it, and I think state parks have tried to develop their own in the field, because one thing that doesn't work really well is when you're in the field, the upload. So we don't have the download to upload capacity yet in Arches, but they're always developing new things, new add-ons, and Arches is also open source. So if you don't want to use ours, you can find somebody who will build you your own database, how exactly you want it. But this is like free, this is free for you guys to use, and invite us to come talk to your land managing unit, and we can share with you some of the ways it's been helpful for others. Do you have anything else to say?
No, I just pulled up, this is what the reports look like when they go in. The photos usually scroll here, they're not loading because of the Wi-Fi, but you know, so you can pull up at each site the list of all the previous scout reports and see, you know, the images and the notes that were typed in there.
And you know, I'm curious, like Chris and Brand and Graham, the people we go out with most, you know, these are reports we're doing while we're in the field, because again, can you verify the site location? You know, there's not a lot of inventories that want to make sure that, yes, it's in the right place. That's a number one question. And then what did you observe that day? And we always have a great discussion, and we learn so much from you all. Definitely more than you all are probably learning from us. But to do after storms, I like it because it's a good, you know, you want to do something useful, you want to be helpful, and that's an activity we can go and do. And we see a lot of storm damage. And I don't know how good the numbers are for the state. I was in the SHPO's office once when they were asking the number of sites impacted by Irma. And he said to somebody else who asked a question that, well, he didn't really know. I'm like, well, I know how many in our database say so. So I think it can help with those kind of numbers. And we have a dedicated database manager. So she's attending to quality control and rapid response for you guys too. Did that help with some of the security, privacy issues or just any other questions? All right, hearing none. Presentation dismissed. Thank you.